Recording
Howdy.
begins.
hmm
Hey, Brian.
Hey, what's up?
Not a
Welcome
lot.
back.
Thank you. Oh, you're talking to me or are you talking
Oh yeah.
to the listeners? Okay. This is Dream Idiots. My name is Morris, and the other fellow who's quite sure of where he is and knows what he's doing is Brian Treat. Each week we
That's
tell each other stories and drag you listeners along for the ride, as bumpy and as uncomfortable and as cringeworthy and as tense as it may be, or it could be fun. Who knows?
yes, welcome back. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you tagging along. Pete Rose just died. Dikembe Mutombo just died. Who else?
Chris Christopherson died
Chris
yesterday.
Christopherson, Maggie Smith. We're batting. We're over this week. All of those suck. Well, Pete Rose, who cares? But
Hundreds of people in the path of Helene, just awful. So
hmm
I hope you have a fun story today. God damn it!
Mine is actually is fun. So every week we do have two stories. We don't tell the other person what's coming. Sometimes they sort of line up in a karmically convenient way. Sometimes they're just completely non sequiturs. But anyway, two stories each week. And we appreciate you tagging along. You can check us out at dreamidiots.com. We're online on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Dream Idiots. If you have a story idea, you can drop us a line at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail. And if you don't mind, on whichever platform you're listening to us on, if you can give us 5 stars and shoot us a review, that is hugely helpful. Helps us climb the charts, supposedly.
Yes, indeed. And I used to mispronounce Dikembe Mutombo's name,
Uh,
and it would make Dave just hideously mad in college. I called him Demetki, and even after he corrected me, I kept calling him that just because he
just
got
piss them off.
so livid and red faced, and it's Dikembe.
Okay, David.
David. All right, you
So,
have an announcement for us tonight? Yeah.
yes, I do indeed. So, just a quick update. On at least two occasions, maybe even three occasions, I have talked about this. This is not really a happy topic, but wanted to throw it in here anyway. This whole new trend, mostly across the South, of replacing lethal injection with nitrogen hypoxia as a means of executing prisoners. So way back when we talked about Alan Eugene Miller and Kenneth Eugene Smith. So Smith was executed back in January. And so what I mean, the reason this is in the news at all is because prior to January, executing someone by poisoning them with nitrogen had never been done. Critics of the death penalty, regardless of the means, view it as cruel, unusual punishment. But it's especially cruel when we have no idea what's going to happen to your body. So they did it in January. It apparently was awful. Smith struggled and gasped, and it was just awful. The guy whose story I told you about way back when, I focused mostly on Alan Eugene Miller. He was executed last week in Alabama by nitrogen. So, it may be the case that Miller is a genuinely bad dude. He was sentenced to death 24 years ago for killing three guys. I'm not trying to say the guy's an angel, but he'd been in prison for a long time. The same guy whose name I've mentioned several times, John Hamm, is the guy who's the Alabama Department of Corrections commissioner and always comes out after these events and does a news conference. He said that, or at least reporters from the AP said that Miller said his final words were, "I didn't do anything to be in here." He shook and trembled on a gurney for about 2 minutes. He pulled against the restraints and there was about so he was shaking and trembling, and then 6 minutes of gulping breaths before he became still. Um, Really, just horrific in virtually every way. This worthless piece of shit Ham said, "quote There's going to be involuntary body movements as the body is depleted of oxygen. That is nothing we did not expect." How did you expect that, Mr. Ham, considering this has only been done once before? And does that make it okay if you knew it was going to happen? Um, so, yeah, I get that people do bad things. I've never been close to someone who's been the victim of a violent crime. Maybe I would feel differently if something bad happened to someone close to me. I get emotions run high, but you are a gigantic piece of shit if in 2024 you are still in favor of the death penalty by any means, even if it is completely humane. The Eighth Amendment of our Constitution is supposed to protect us against cruel and unusual punishment. That expression, cruel and unusual punishment, goes back, I think, more than 100 years prior to the U.S. Constitution, that adoption. And in this country, in this current climate, we have people that are freak out, die hard Second Amendment advocates, but I don't get why no one is really an Amendment advocate at all, because this is just staggering to me that this is now going to be apparently the new norm. So anyway,
It's pretty vile. And I
yeah,
think the
it's
reason that there's no Eighth Amendment supporters is because, a gun is something tangible, right? So,
yeah, and
you've
I
got a
mean,
thing you can
and right,
idolize and worship.
and and guns are cool, and it's a whatever, it's a penis replacement, it's a whatever, it's like fuck you, why isn't there a right to freedom of religion advocates pushing aggressively? It's always these Second Amendment assholes, and this is disgusting. The guy was probably a bad guy. Fine, throw him in jail, throw the key away and let him rot there. Great, but this is just insane to me. And so, not that funny, but worth mentioning.
And now a story about fluffy bunnies.
Anyway, I do have a story that is lighter because I knew I had that sort of heavier introduction. Ever heard of a man named Barry Bremen?
Barry Bremen.
Bremen.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, but I can't place
Okay.
it.
Barry Bremen's born in Detroit, Michigan, June 1947. Like a bunch of kids, young men of that generation living in the Midwest, big sports fan. And while he's athletic, didn't really seem to have much athletic prowess. And it was clear early on he wasn't going to make a career out of being a professional basketball player or anything else. He first, as a young man, got a job teaching history at a junior high school, then shifted gears, went into selling life insurance, went to Michigan State, had kind of a suburban life with his wife, a Michigan State Spartan named Margot, had three kids, loved sports. He was an okay basketball player, and he's a pretty big guy, 6'4", over 200 pounds, a typical Midwest sports fan. And early adulthood, he starts shifting gears a little bit and kind of takes on, let's call it a hobby. He's playing basketball with some friends at the Jewish Community Center in West Bloomfield, Michigan. This is mid 70s. And he's playing just this little pickup ball with some buddies. And during these games, when he would either during the game he would wear it, or on the way there, he's wearing a warm up uniform. In one story, it says this uniform was given to him by a friend. Another take on this guy says that he had gone to a Pistons game and somehow managed to steal a uniform from the long defunct Kansas City Kings. They were the team visiting for this night. So he winds up with this Kansas City Kings uni that he wears to the gym. And so the the next night, the All-Star game, NBA All-Star game, is scheduled for the Pontiac Silverdome. Again, this guy's 6'4". He can sort of play the part. Uh, and he mentions in passing to his friends, you know what? If I went down there, I bet I could get, if I wore this, I bet I could get down there and get on the court, and no one would be the wiser. At least, I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to get in the game, but I could probably get pretty close, and people would buy it. 6'4" is frankly short for the NBA these days. Back then, I mean, the average height was probably lower back then. And so he goes down there, And his friends sort of say, okay, we're going to take this action. But, four of his friends, all four pony up $75 saying, we can't, we're betting against you. And it's not just you get on the floor. You have to get on the floor and get into the warm up and actually at least take a shot in order to collect the money. He goes, fine. I'm taking this action. So next day, February 4th, Bremen and his wife actually go down to the game, and he has Bremen has the King's warm up suit on underneath his street clothes, and they had sort of he must have known the layout from having gone to other games in the past, where a good spot would be. Halftime comes around, and he heads off to a bathroom down close to one of the access points to the floor. Uh, Takes off kind of overcoat, pulls off jeans. He has the bottoms on underneath, and his wife is like, guarding the door a little bit and keeping watch out for when the team's coming back, and knocks on the door to give him a sign and when to come out. Team goes by, and he just joins the line as they are heading back to the court. Between the bet and this night, he had quickly stitched on the back of the name Johnson, just figuring Johnson's common enough. No one's gonna,
Yeah.
no one's gonna think that's whatever. And so he gets in line, and there is video of this. Look up after we're done here. Look this up on YouTube. It's hilarious. And he goes down there, gets on the court, and they're running drills and etc. He said later, I was pretty nervous at the time. I never broken the law before, so my first basket didn't even come close. But I told the players, "Hey, I'm only here on a bet." They loved it. They were great about it. He's there kicking the ball around, doing warm ups to begin the second half with.
Well, if he's kicking the ball around, he's not playing the sport right at all, Brian. That's not how basketball works.
He's there with Kareem and Dr. J, and then before long, NBA officials go, "Wait a minute, who is this guy?" And he doesn't try to play off like he's supposed to be. Oh, okay, you caught me, fair enough. And he's escorted off. But actually, he gets a couple of people there want his autograph as he's heading out. So this winds up being a much bigger deal than he could have ever possibly anticipated. He makes the $300 off of his buddies at the time. So 70s Dick Schaap is a name I know because he's been around forever. His son Jeremy Schaap he's a sports writer and broadcaster to this day. Dick Schaap names Bremen his Sportsman of the Week on the Today Show. And then almost immediately he's on Carson as well. And so, Bremen's now kind of has a bit of a buzz off of this. And it's like, okay, so what's next? I need the next chapter in this. So he starts looking around. Okay, Toledo, Ohio, U.S. Open's coming. So he's at least a moderately, he's ish, he can play golf enough to pass off. He finds out that a pro golfer, a guy named Jerry Pate, had dropped out of a threesome practice round with two guys. These are I don't know golf really at all. I know the big names: Jerry Pate, Wayne Levy, or Kip Byrne. Three guys I've never heard of before. But Bremen just offers to join them, brings a buddy along to work as his caddy, and he just plays the back nine with these guys. And it's kind of a serene golf scene. No one's really worried about his presence, just to just kind of give himself some better cover. He has another friend come along who intentionally stops him and asks him for his autograph again, just to pump some life into it,
just to sell it. That's
right.
Great.
Levy said later on, quote, "Yeah, we thought he was playing bad because he was an amateur. He told us this was his first Open, and we didn't ask any questions, just what he was doing, where he'd been, and stuff like that. We didn't care." After finishing, Bremen confesses to the other two that he was just phony. It was just a silly game he was playing. But as a flourish, as he's walking up to the 18th green, he takes his cap off and does the Jack Nicklaus, waving to
Yes.
onlookers, and then leaves the course. Dick Schaap declared him sportsman of the week again for the second time, So, 2 weeks in a row. And then Bremen actually would go back and crash two more opens. He did it in 1980 and then again in
Ah,
85, getting off without without getting into trouble. So next up, he has to ratchet up the I don't know the pressure, the stakes. He has in mind the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. He goes out, he picks up a essentially a custom, really really close to a legit Yankees uniform, uh, and managed to get into the facility for the game. Because well, backing up to the uniform, it mostly passed muster. At closer inspection after the fact, there were a couple details that were off and kind of gave him away.
Yankees is
The
misspelled.
well, he had the Yankees cleats were black and his were white, but he colored them in with like a black marker that didn't look right. He also tried to add white stripes to the sides of the sneakers, and he did that sort of crappily as well. So he couldn't really, in closer inspection, he kind of gave himself away. This game, President Gerald Ford is in attendance for the actually for this game, and so Secret Service is there. So there's definitely a higher level of security there. Um, the reason he was able to get in there and actually get into the causeway down below is because at this point, two players, in particular George Brett and Tommy John, helped him. Uh, got him in the facility and hid him out in a sauna just off of the locker room. And so after Secret Service, basically when finished their searching, he joined the line. For some reason, Reggie Jackson was late getting to the field, and so no one kind of was head counting. And "Hey, is everyone here? Okay, good. We're all good." No one knows the head count was off, and he remained there long enough for player introductions to happen. And he was seconds away from quote being introduced to the crowd with the rest of the players. And then you figured out, wait a minute, who's this dude? And he claimed later he was handcuffed and detained for a while, mostly because of Ford being there. But
Was
again,
this before or after the assassination attempts on Ford's? Probably after, right?
probably after, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, some of the dates on this don't quite line up because this actually says 79. And Ford was not president then. So I don't know. Um, at the end of 1979, this was probably harder to pull off in terms of falling into line and being legit. He dressed as a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader and
Ugh.
managed to jump over the fence and get in line. But the Cowboys famously are not known for their humor. He was arrested, threatened with a lawsuit by the front office. They didn't see the humor. He got banned from the facility, and he promised never do it again. Again, no criminal charges, but again, they were definitely pretty pissed off. In the 1980 NFL Pro Bowl game, which at the time I think still is always held in Hawaii, he again gets into the facility and he trots out onto the field wearing the jersey of a man named Lem Barney. Uh, Lem Barney had been a longtime Detroit Lions player who had gotten to know Bremen because Bremen's a hometown boy in Detroit. And so Barney just says, "Oh yeah, here, take all of my shit." Gave him the uniform and everything, and Bremen gets on the field. Barney is black. Bremen is white. He still managed to get on the field. And then, so he's Bremen got on the field and was on the sidelines all the way until the third quarter before security went before anyone realized, wait a minute, you're not. That's not you. And some of the players chanted after the security, "You can't take Lem Barney," yelling and screaming at him. But it's just this dude, this random 6'4" dude with a mustache.
Uh,
So at this point,
so he
he's
went he
getting
went all the way to Hawaii for this bit.
right, right from Detroit.
Not cheap.
No, not cheap. So at this point, born. So he's, in well into his 30s now, and decides, well, it's hard to pass me off as a player anymore. I'm going to start passing myself off as an official now instead.
There you
O-
go.
October 14th, 1980, Game One of the World Series in Philadelphia. If you were a fan for this game, you looked out and you would see before the game seven umpires huddling together to chat through their respective positions and requirements during the game. One of these seven was Barry Bremen. He had gotten access to the field because he'd somehow gotten a media credential, which were probably easy to obtain. So gets the media credential. Uh, Somehow he had a friend because some other either current or recently retired umpire had given him the uniform to borrow. So he goes there with an official uniform, gets into place, discards the outer layer of whatever he was wearing, the suit, gets rid of those clothes, puts on the blue jacket and all the gear, the turtleneck that he had borrowed, goes out on the field. He's chatting with other umps, some of whom recognized him, but like, wait, I know your face. What? How? Hmm. But he's out there. He stood for the national anthem. But then when it actually comes time for first pitch, then he leaves of his own volition, and he's not really gonna. I mean, he's not. It's so innocent, really.
He's not going to pull a
Um,
Leslie Nielsen and start calling balls and
right, right,
strikes
right.
behind the home
Uh,
plate.
and he said later, quote, "Are you kidding me? Getting out to home plate at a World Series game, then getting away with it without getting spotted? That's like Mission Impossible. I still can't believe I got away with it." So just a few months later, in New Orleans at this Superdome, Super Bowl 15, he had decided, he's gearing up now for these games. So he has tearaway clothes. He has the Velcro pants and things that are easy to rip off quickly. Again, he hides under the bleachers in the Superdome behind some plywood. Waits until he sees other referees jog out, and then again just quickly kind of steps in line and starts running out with them. And hey, Tony, hey, Phil, whatever the but again, when they look at him, he's not trying to pretend he really is supposed to be there. He's freely admitting this is just, I'm just going to crash this party for a second until someone throws me out. One of the NFL officials was noticed that Bremens was wearing a number 12 on his striped shirt, and this official was also wearing number 12. Okay, we can't have number 12. So yeah, so get out. So Bremen he left the Superdome, went outside, ran across the street, put his street clothes back on, then returned to the game as a ticket holder just to watch the rest of it. The following year, the NFL posted pictures of Bremen at various places. Keep an eye out for this dude. One time, in order to get around that, he showed up dressed as the San Diego Chicken. But he didn't get in because the real San Diego Chicken was only 5'7". It's like, no, dude, yeah, nice try. So for most of 83 and 84, he was pretty quiet. He did make an appearance on Late Night with David Letterman. Had a few other sort of, TV, or promotional type appearances.
He seems
Uh,
absolutely like somebody who would appear on David Letterman in
yeah,
1983. That
that's
is,
yeah,
yeah.
that's spot on, right?
Jerry Lawler and
Right.
Andy
Andy
Kaufman and
Kaufman, right?
yeah.
So for the 37th Primetime Emmys, which were held in September of 1985, they're held in Pasadena. Bremen manages to get into the get into the room. Actor Peter Graves is on stage, and he's going down a list of nominees for Best Supporting Actress in a Drama Series. And going down the names, the winner was Betty Thomas, who I can't picture at all from Hill Street Blues. I never watched that
Mhm.
show. Uh, so Betty Thomas's name is called out, and it's not Betty Thomas who's sprinting up the stairs to accept the award. It's Bremen. He goes up there, walks up to the podium, quickly explains that Thomas couldn't be there, but she wanted him to accept the award on her behalf. He went on to quickly thank Dick Shapp before running off running off stage with the Emmy in his hands. Uh, Thomas was apparently seated, further back, or we're just I don't know, we're just moving slowly. So she's like there in the aisle, looking really confused because no, I'm actually here. Who the hell are you? And so he wanders off. Um, he again in this instance as well. He had pretended to be a member of the media to get access to the place. He did he bought a ticket as well to be um, seated there. And he had pondered doing this on other occasions. He had actually made it into the Oscars and the Emmys, but got cold feet each time. And so the reason he accepted Thomas's award is because he was convinced that she was not there for some reason. I don't know why he thought that, but so he didn't know he was really gonna gonna piss someone off. So he goes up there, accepts the award. He does get arrested, on basically grand theft and given a fine, and completely pisses her off. And she's so angry she basically refuses to talk about it ever again. In 1986, he manages to sneak again onto the field at the Astrodome for the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and so Tommy Lasorda is there, as one of the managers.
Oh, I
Uh,
bet he's not a funny guy. I bet he doesn't like funny
no,
stuff.
no, no.
Yeah.
Bremen was there somehow this time in a Mets uniform. Bremen is there at the All-Star Game taking batting practice. And Lasorda goes, "God damn it!" and recognizes him, throws him out. And so that was basically it. He wouldn't sort of officially retire until 1997. He said later that the stakes were kind of getting too high, media pressure was a little too much. Celebrity stalking was kind of turning into more and more of a problem. 1993, Monica Seles gets stabbed.
Jesus.
And I remember that was awful,
Was that
awful.
31 years ago? Holy shit.
Yeah. And so then okay, maybe this isn't as funny as it used to be. Now the stakes are so high. He goes on to, he leaves life insurance, starts a marketing firm, doing other things. Dies in 2011 at the age of 64. I believe from lung cancer. He'd been I think a lifelong smoker, and it wasn't found out until after he died. I don't know. I'm not really sure quite what to think of this. Through virtually all of his adult life, he had been a very, very constant anonymous sperm donor. And so after the birth of these children, there's a 30 for 30 on Barry Bremen. It's discovered that he has somewhere between 32 and 60 biological children who are conceived through his contributions, and learned of the connection through genetic testing. And that's a staggeringly high number. I know a little bit about that process, having multiple friends go through fertility issues as well. And I know for a fact that if you're a sperm donor and your sperm is successfully used to conceive a child that is born, etc., that they don't let tons of your children just, I mean, after you've had, I thought it was like 3, 4, 5 successful births. They're like, okay, the rest of your supply has to be used for other testing. We're not actually going to use it for in vitro fertilization. I
Yeah,
don't.
sure. Spackle, whatever. Yeah.
Right, right, yes. But anyway, so he has dozens of children. Apparently, many of whom have now met because they've gotten together and had events and stuff. But
And they're all
just
out there
for
sneaking into
yeah.
baseball games. And
Right. So anyway, the great imposter, Barry Bremen, a life well
that's
lived.
hilarious. I would have loved to have seen him taking batting practice with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. That would have been great.
Yeah,
Like a
the the
Bill Parcells diet of cigarettes and donuts.
the 30 for 30 short on him is hilarious because you see him there with these guys striding in for that warm up. It's really really funny.
The Benny
So
Thomas thing was kind of shitty. That
yeah,
that
kind
that
of.
that that seems like yeah, I mean, whatever, but the other stuff is awesome.
Shagging shagging fly balls. Yeah, yeah. Not supposed to be here.
That
Anyway, Barry Bremen, there you go. A lighter
is
story this
awesome.
week.
That is fantastic. Thanks, Brian. I
Yep.
knew I recognized the name, but I couldn't. was like, is he an attorney? Is he what is he? Barry
Yeah, just
Bremen.
just just go on YouTube and Google his name. I mean, there are various clips on there about him, including the 30 for 30 short, and that's voiced by Jeremy Shapp, actually.
Oh,
So
very nice. Okay.
yeah, so there you have it.
Speaking of voices,
Hmm.
do we have some foul mouth curse word of the weeks this week, or curse words of the week?
We do have a curse word this week coming from. I'm sure this is Japanese. Kuchi sabishihi. Kuchi sabishihi. The Japanese word is sort of like, Schadenfreude. It's a word that does not translate into English at all.
Well, I'm not even gonna try if it starts with coochie. I'm not even gonna.
Kuchi sabishihi is a Japanese word that means when you're not hungry, but you eat because your mouth is lonely.
Okay.
It's like oddly specific. Like, what is that? I don't know. I thought it was funny.
So you're satisfying
Yeah,
some kind of oral
right.
fixation, and
Yeah, it's whatever. Boredom eating. That when watching a game, chips are required whether you're hungry or not. But the
gotcha.
fact that they have one word for it, I just thought it was kind of
That is
entertaining.
awesome. And we haven't done any Japanese curse words. That's our first Japanese curse word, I
I think
believe.
so.
Kuchi sihi
Kuchi sabishihi.
sabishihi. Okay. Well, you learn something new every week. At
I
least I do.
try. We're planting seeds here.
Are you ready for my story, Brian?
I am.
Okay, you'll recall a few weeks back, I did a story on a musician who disappeared, a guy by the name of Jim Sullivan, and I called that Missing Notes. And I've got another Missing Notes story here today. You ever heard of Sheila McDonald?
Sheila McDonald. No.
And that's spelled a very Scottish way, Shelagh. She was
Mm.
indeed Scottish. In 1971, Sheila McDonald was on the verge of becoming the next big thing on the British folk music scene. There was no shortage of amazing women vocalists for the genre and for the decade, including but not limited to Sandy Denny of the Strawbs, Fairport Convention, and Fotheringay, Maddie Pryor of Steel Eyed Span, Linda Thompson, June Tabor, Anne Briggs, and of course, Shirley Collins, who'd been recording great music since the mid 50s. Sheila had two critically acclaimed LPs under her belt, the first of which was her 1970 self titled debut. Stuart Mason, who wrote of the album decades later, would say Joni Mitchell meets early Fairport Convention, Judy Sill jamming with Pentangle. The first album by Scotland's Sheila MacDonald has that sort of cross cultural appeal. It's not easy to remember what different paths folk rock had taken in the US and the UK until one listens to this album and how skillfully it combines intimate confessional songwriting with a traditionally bent music inclination. McDonald's voice is a clear, lovely soprano with some of Joni Mitchell's phrasing, but none of her more piercing affectations, and a bit of Sandy Denny's richness and warmth. So that's not bad company to sit with. Judy Sill, she was American, but Judy Sill, Joni Mitchell, also Canadian, um, and then Sandy Denny. So that's pretty heady company. McDonald's second album, Stargazer, from September of 1971, cemented her place in the modern British folk scene. Reggie Unterberger, also writing many years later for All Music Guide, would describe that the album can be unequivocally recommended to fans of Mitchell and Denny who have run out of things to buy by those two singers and want something that's for the most part undiscovered, but with a similar vibe. So not really as glowing as Mason's review, but still, again, that comparison's there. And UK music critics jumped on it, dubbing her the new Sandy Denny, primarily in reaction to this second album. Now, when you think of this comparison to Sandy Denny, and I don't know how much you know about British folk rock of the 60s and 70s.
Not
I know
much.
you're a Jethro Tull fan, and they're definitely of that inclination. In fact,
Hmm.
Fairport Convention shared some of the same musicians as Jethro Tull.
So well.
Um, the weight of this may be difficult to comprehend for those unfamiliar with British folk rock of the 60s and 70s, but as a comparison, imagine the incredible pressure of being labeled the next Bob Dylan. And just despite what you may think of Bob Dylan or his voice, there is no doubt, and it's you cannot argue that he did not have an amazing effect on popular music.
Right.
I can think of one musician who lived up to that hype, and that's Bruce Springsteen. His debut album, and I know you're not a Springsteen fan, his debut album, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, reviewed by such rock critics as William Rollman and Robert Christgau, generated such comparisons between the two musicians. While Sandy Denny may not be a household name here in America, as she certainly should be, in the world of 60s and 70s British folk rock, the parallels with Shelagh McDonald loom large. I mean, it's a hell of a comparison. Later in 1971, Sheila began recording her third album. Then one day, she was gone. Fellow folkies and fans wondered where she went. Even Sandy Robertson, her manager and producer, had no idea what became of her. I never heard from Sheila again, he said in a 2004 interview. I tried to call her, but the number had been cut off. She just vanished. And that is exactly what happened. Stories circulated among the London folk rock scene as to Sheila's fate. She had a bad acid trip. She turned to religion. She split back to Scotland, perhaps forced there by her parents. She wanted out of the music business. She left for Canada and started a new career writing children's books. Sheila was 23 years old when she vanished. For over 3 decades, the whereabouts of Sheila McDonald remained unknown. Some speculated that she was no longer alive, another casualty of the music scene. Remember, in a span from July of 1969 through July of 1971, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, Alan Wilson of Canned Heat, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison all died. In May of 1972, audience members at a top-ranked suite in Wales watched in horror as Les Harvey, the lead guitarist for the Scottish blues rock band Stone the Crows, was electrocuted by a loose ground wire during a concert. All 6 of these musicians were 27 years old. Death was no stranger to the youth of the music industry. And of course, these are all charter members of the 27 Club that we know other musicians
Right.
would eventually join. In 2005, a 2 CD compilation set, Let No Man Steal Your Time, and that's time like the herb, arrived in stores courtesy of Castle Music. It contained all of Sheila's 2 albums, plus bonus cuts, some previously unreleased. In short, it contained all of her extant recordings, everything she ever did. It's brilliant. The liner notes, expertly written by David Wells, tells as much of the story that is known. These notes serve as the main source for this story. And as of the writing of those liner notes, Sheila's fate was still a mystery. But later in November of 2005, the Scottish Daily Mail offices received a visitor, a woman claiming to be Sheila McDonald. The paper had run a story about McDonald which had caught her eye. It wasn't the first article to feature the disappearance. Journalist Charles Donovan of The Independent can claim that distinction. After his article, numerous stories asking the same question, whatever happened to Sheila McDonald, cropped up, including the aforementioned one in the Scottish Daily Mail. As time passed after the woman's appearance at the Daily Mail's office, it became clear that she was indeed Sheila McDonald. She ended up telling her stories in a series of interviews over the next few years, including a lengthy one for BBC Scotland on November 2nd, 2013, with, I think, Graham Stewart. They just call him Graham in the interview, and I could not track down who exactly this was. But after a brief rundown of her talent, including the infamous Sandy Denny question and comparing her to Joan Baez, Graham says, almost in one weekend, your career went in the stink. McDonald agreed with that sentiment, but also pointed out that she had never, quote, thought of myself as a particularly good singer. Artists can be their own worst critics. And at no time during the interview did either participant, both Scottish, utter the phrase purple burglar alarm. Sheila revealed what happened to her back in 1971. All of the rumors of her disappearance that circulated in 1971 onward had a bit of truth in them. It started with a bad LSD trip. She had smoked a little pot here and there, no more than 5 times, she said. But she had read Timothy Leary's 1968 book, The Politics of Ecstasy, and wanted to see if LSD could tap into some kind of artistic well. It was her second time dosing, and at first during the trip, she claimed, I was a genius, full of ideas for new songs. She had found the source of creativity much in the same way a person becomes funny a few drinks into the evening or philosophically deep after a bong hit. She learned this genius was fleeting. Quote, you wake up the next morning and it's all garbage. And having written some academic papers, I can say that that's absolutely true. When you write something under the influence of something, you think, oh my God, I'm making some deep. And the next day you look at it, it's like, what ham sandwich? What the hell is
Pound
this?
three ampersand. What does this mean?
Is this English? She was crushed. So she withdrew, returning home to Scotland to live with her parents. She didn't really turn to religion. She had been raised Christian Scientist, so there were no medications or hospitalizations to help her find herself. She did it by holding an ordinary job followed by study and reading in a local library. From 5:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., this was her schedule 6 days a week. Oh, and the rumors of relocation to Canada and writing children's books, according to David Wells, those were the result of mistaken identity. Sheila, spelled the same way, Montez, whose maiden name was indeed McDonald, was both an expat Brit and children's author living in Canada. So there was a Sheila McDonald who moved to Canada, just not the Sheila McDonald we're talking about. You disappeared into relative oblivion, said Graham in the BBC interview, to which Sheila sort of agrees. Her bad trip had left her voice wrecked, that of a, quote, strangled cat. So she worked and studied and dealt with the loss of her voice. While working at a bookstore, she met Gordon Farquhar. They were married, and then after a series of interactions with, quote, bad landlords, they decided to live off the grid, traveling around Scotland in a trailer, or what they would call a caravan, and then living in a tent for 6 years. Gordon had been a researcher stationed in Antarctica at one point, and living in a tent not out on the ice appealed to him. They worked odd jobs and received state assistance. But in their struggle, they gained a level of freedom they had not experienced before. However, quoting Sheila, real freedom is terror. She thought only about survival, with no time for music. And this went on for years, until Gordon noticed an article in the Scottish Daily Mail and read it to her. She apparently had no idea people were looking for her for the past 30-something years. I didn't realize, she said. Then the confusion turned to anger. How dare they intrude and make her private life subject to such scrutiny? She learned of her parents' deaths upon reading the story. They had been
God.
estranged for 3 decades. There was a lot of information to absorb. After the article, she headed into the offices of the Daily Mail, and that's when her private life became public again, but this time on her own terms. Gordon passed away in 2012, and now she faced a different phase in her life. She started over, from scratch, she said, relearning the guitar and training her voice. She was coaxed into performing again for the first time in 4 decades on January 16th, 2013, which she described as, quote, primal scream therapy, but without the therapy part. She recorded a new album, Parnassus Revisited, distributed almost exclusively at her live performances throughout 2014. And this does not appear in the All Music Guide as one of her albums. She went on a longer tour in 2017 with promises of another new collection of songs titled Timescapes. When asked, she doesn't consider her decades-long hiatus a waste of time. She lived the life she wanted, the way she wanted, with the partner she wanted. Fame, she reflected, is not worth chasing after.
Hmm.
And that is a brief look at the disappearance of British folk rock vocalist Sheila McDonald in 1971.
Very cool.
Sources for this story, the liner notes to the 2 CD collection Sheila McDonald, Let No Man Steal Your Time from 2004. David Wells wrote that. Castle Music, a label of from Sanctuary Records. And then I did indeed listen to the 2 CD collection Sheila McDonald, Let No Man Steal Your Time while writing this. An article, the original article by Charles Donovan of The Independent from June 23rd, 2005, called Mystery Woman. That's the article that started everything off, where everybody started doing their own stories. Sheila McDonald, the extended interview with BBC Scotland in November 2nd, 2013. All Music Guide, several authors contributed to this on the All Music Guide. Jason Ekeny, or Ankeny, sorry, Jason. The biographical bits, Stuart Mason for his review of Sheila McDonald's self-titled album from 71, Richie Uttenberger's review of Stargazer from 1971, and Wikipedia for basic info. The Sheila McDonald self-titled is actually 1970, and Wikipedia for basic bio info on the folks in the story.
Wow. Never heard of her. Yeah, super interesting story. I'm sorry. She's wrong. You don't, if you're 20, 22, I don't know, 30, 50, you don't get to just vanish because you want to. I'm sorry. That's not allowed.
Yeah, I don't think I could do that to people, but
No.
at the
So
same
yeah, by all
time,
means, media, by all means, fuck them. But you're allowed to take a break and vanish from public life. But you have to tell your friends and your family what's going on. That's just
yeah,
shitty.
she left a lot of people in her wake who really were concerned about where she went.
Right.
And I think the LSD trip was worse than she described it. That something really broke inside of her when that
Right.
happened. But I have not trod down that path myself, so I don't know. Um, I do think it's one of the more interesting stories, and the fact that I mean, she was so disconnected from what we would call the modern world that I didn't realize people were looking for
Right.
me. Part of the reason they weren't is because your parents were dead. They could no longer look for you.
Right. And you're off the grid living in a tent somewhere. So
Yeah, somewhere in Scotland, just
right.
driving around. I do recommend checking out her music, and also the music of the other ladies I mentioned: Anne Briggs, Shirley Collins, Linda Thompson, June Tabor, of course, Sandy Denny, who herself would go on to actually a very tragic death in the late '70s when she fell down a flight of stairs. And then Maddie Pryor of Steel Eye Span. All of them are really well worth checking out if you're interested at all in British folk rock of the
Nice.
era.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hmm. And
Very, very interesting.
there will be more installments of Missing Notes in the future. I've got two, maybe three planned, two or three more. I
All
keep
right.
coming across folks I want to talk about. So probably another one
Yeah.
next month sometime.
Yeah. Any like, I mean, obviously there's a boatload of famous musicians who died young. I can't think of someone else who's prominent who went that I've heard of that is missing. So looking forward to that because you'll surprise. I'm sure you'll surprise me all three times because your music knowledge is way deeper than mine.
Well, uh it really combines two of my favorite things, music and people who just vanish. Where the hell did they go? What
Right. How'd that happen? Right.
even in the weirdest part of the '70s with Bigfoot and UFOs and Bermuda Triangles, I was still always fascinated with people who just poof, just one day they're
Right.
there, the next day gone.
I'm actually
Ah,
I'm working very much in the background on a longer story as well that involves a missing person. And if you ever dive into and this isn't supernatural stuff, this is just people who they're there and then suddenly they're gone. If you ever do some research and look into I mean, the number of occurrences that happen in pick it, your city, your county, your state, those numbers are staggeringly high and much higher
mhm.
than you realize.
Yeah.
It's
And
just it's
that's today when it's very hard to disappear.
right, right. With when there are when cameras are universal and during your daily life, my daily life, we're spotted on cameras at the banks, whatever it is, 25 times or 35 times a day. People still vanish. So back in the 70s, 60s, gosh, so
Yep.
easy.
And
Anyway,
your comment about cameras being everywhere, that's why I'm always picking my nose in public, Brian. Few people
okay,
know
good.
that.
I always wondered.
Just in case they catch me with a, knuckle deep in my own nose.
All
That's
right.
I'm doing it to make the camera people upset. Anyways,
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for listening, folks. We appreciate you tagging along yet again for another in an endless series of silliness. Please give us 5 stars, shoot us a review if you can on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Dream Idiots. And you can go to dreamidiots.com for the whole back catalog. And I've actually started taking the video for these podcasts and dumping them on YouTube as well. Not that it's riveting video, but if you want talking head, we have two. So there you have it.
Big fat talking heads. Anyway, rest in peace, Maggie Smith. Rest in peace, Chris Christopherson, Pete Rose, Dikembe Mutombo. And if you're out there and have been in the path of Hurricane Helene, what's a desert? Yeah, Hurricane Helene, right? That's a
Mhm.
designation. Um, we hope you're doing all right and hang in there. And while you're out there, be good to each other.